Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Self-defense in Canada is complicated and controversial, and one show tried to tackle this by bringing on a panel of experts to discuss. Now, a lot of you reached out to me to ask me to check their work, especially with regards to the discussions about the legalities of self-defense and weapons law. So we're going to do that. I'm also going to have some comments about some of the other things they have to say. So let's dive right in and see what's going on. There's a fair bit here. I'm probably not going to make any friends today, but let's have a look. So first up, we've got this clip. I'm not going to play the whole video, and this is from a show. It's on the Zoomer. It's titled Self-Defense in Canada. I'm going to link it in the description below. You can watch the whole thing. But this is aimed at boomers, even though it's called the Zoomer. And so keep that in mind as we watch this, because this is aimed at an older crowd. And that's very relevant when we're talking about self-defense and when we're talking about sort of what you can and can't do. Okay, here we go.
The law say about self-defense in Canada? When are Canadians permitted to use force to defend themselves?
Right. Well, in Canada, we have the right to defend ourselves, our loved ones. We have the right to defend our property, but it's solely for the purpose of defense, defending yourself. You have to be.
So far, he is entirely accurate. The problem is going to come up when he starts getting into an example, which is just about to happen. But right now, he's doing good.
Be reasonable. So a judge...
Wait a minute, what's reasonable?
What's reasonable is...
Someone breaks into your home in the night.
Right. Well, if it's a bunch of teenagers who break into your home, they don't have any weapons, and you go after them with a golf club, that's no longer reasonable. You're now using excessive force against those teenagers.
But how are you supposed to...
Whoa. I think this is a really, really bad example. And I've been told that this guy is a great guy. I've never met him. I've been told he's a great lawyer. He's in another province, so I've never seen him work. But I'm just going to assume he's having a bad day, because we all do. And this example is not a good example. Again, he's talking to an audience that are older people. And he's saying, so a bunch of teenagers break in. Well, how many is a bunch? Maybe 4? So 4 teenagers break in. They're kind of in the prime of health. Teenagers can be dangerous, weapon or no weapon. And when you're talking about, people who might be in their 80s, then yeah, it's a serious issue if you've got 4 people that you're up against. I think the problem with the golf club in his example is not that it's excessive force. It actually might not be enough. If I am sleeping, and I'm not, a boomer, I am significantly younger than that. I'm maybe not the peak of physical prowess, but if I'm asleep and I hear that there are 4 people who've broken in and they're coming down towards me, golf club isn't my first choice. My first choice might be something a little more emphasis. So, now that isn't to say that it's going to be, okay, I see them and I just start blasting, but certainly I think it might be reasonable in the circumstance where you're outnumbered 4-1 or even 4-2, but they're healthier and younger and so forth, to go for something more than a golf club. And yeah, I think this is a really bad example for that reason. He's actually going to do a pretty good job of describing the law. I'm going to let him do it, and then I'm going to go over what the law says. And so let's go back to it. We're going to see what he has to say, and then we're going to go to the criminal code.
To know that they don't have any weapons.
You don't, oftentimes you don't. And you're right, it's a very difficult situation, but you have to remember, at some point, a judge is going to scrutinize your behavior and what you did. And, some of the questions a judge is going to ask, for example, what was the nature of the threat or force? How imminent was the threat? Did you have other options? Did you have to go at the person with a baseball bat or a golf club in that scenario? They will look at what other options were open to you, right? So it's very important to keep that in mind.
Nikki, this is something.
Okay, so, I mean, he's right. I mean, the judge isn't going to ask you questions in court, but I'm pretty sure he means, just to be fair to him here, I'm pretty sure he means that the judge is going to be asking these questions, like, in the judge's head. And these are relevant considerations. Let's look at the law of self-defense in Canada with regards to use of force to protect yourself. And it notes that a person is not guilty of an offense if you meet these criteria. And first is that you believe on reasonable grounds that force is being used against you or another person, or that a threat of force is being made against you or another person. And the reasonable grounds here means that it doesn't mean that you have to be accurate. You can be wrong, but it does have to be reasonable. It can't be, an unreasonable notion in the sense of like if somebody looks at you funny from across the room, you can't go to like, oh, I got to defend myself against this guy's weird look. But if somebody is has broken into your house and is approaching you looking like they're going to use force, then that might be reasonable. It might be. All of self-defense law is very context specific, and small details, small changes in the facts can be a big deal. So the next thing you need is that the act constitutes the offense is committed for the purpose of defending or protecting yourself or the other person from that use of force. So when he said you have to be acting defensively, this is exactly what he's referring to. And you do actually, this matters because sometimes people are acting for revenge or anger. Those aren't suitable, right? That's not something that you're allowed to do. But so long as you're acting in defense, you might be covered by this. And the next thing is the act committed is reasonable in the circumstances. Now, reasonable in the circumstances is, of course, the problem. What does that mean? Because reasonable in the circumstances is unclear to most people. But the court, or the law, and courts in the past have specified that there are a number of things that they are going to consider. Basically, they're going to consider all the relevant circumstances, everything about the instance, but specifically, they'll look at certain things. So the nature of the force or threat. If somebody's going to throw a rolled up ball of paper at you, that is force that they're using against you. Would it be legitimate to shoot that person to prevent them from throwing a crumpled up ball of paper at you? Obviously not, right? But if instead they're going to throw a knife at you, then it might be legitimate to shoot them. So, because throwing the knife is potentially a lethal threat. So the extent to which the use of force was imminent and whether there were other means available to respond to the potential use of force. Now, somebody who's in your house and is approaching you, with their fists up, that's imminent, right? It's about to happen right now. Whereas if somebody's phoning you and is like, I'm gonna kick the crap out of you on Tuesday, and it's Wednesday, you got 6 whole days, not imminent. And in there, they would say it's not appropriate to shoot them, maybe just call the cops or avoid them, right? Imminence matters. The person's role in the incident. What was I doing? Was I provoking the use of force in some fashion? Like, was I in some way causing this scenario? Or am I, as in the example that was given, a complete innocent, right? I'm just a homeowner and they're the people invading my space and trying to do violence to me. My person's role is innocent homeowner, which is pretty much as good as you can get for self-defense. Whether any party to the incident used or threatened to use a weapon. Now, note that this isn't definitive. Somebody who is 80 and maybe has osteoporosis or some other health conditions might be in a serious lethal threat from potentially getting a beating by 4 people, even if none of them have a weapon. So, and a lot of people have this notion that Canadian law requires parity of things. So they're like, if somebody's unarmed, you have to be unarmed. That's not true. Or, if the person's just armed with a knife, you have to only use a knife. I can tell you, if you attack a police officer with a knife, the police officer is going to shoot you. And, he's not required to match knife for knife. Even if he's got a knife on his duty belt, he's allowed to say, well, this is lethal. I'm going to defend myself with the best tool available, so long as it's reasonable. And certainly somebody trying to stab you to death, it's reasonable to use lethal force there. Now, whether that'll be true in your specific circumstances, highly context specific. We'll talk about that a little further. So the next thing is the size, age, gender, and physical capabilities of the parties to the incident. Again, in this example, that really weighs against the, the bunch of teenagers, however many that is. The nature, duration, and history of any relationship between the parties to the incident, including any prior use or threat of force, and the nature of that force or threat. So let's say somebody beats you to within an inch of your life every time they see you. And then they see you again and they're approaching you menacingly. The court can say, yeah, it's reasonable for you to think that you're about to get a really serious beating because that's happened every other time, right? Any history of interaction or communication between the parties to the incident? Has this person been threatening to kill you for the past 6 months? And now they show up at your door with a fire axe. That's relevant. The nature and proportionality of the person's response to the use or threat of force. It's a factor to be considered, but it's not determinative. So, yeah, is your force reasonable is going to depend on a lot of things. And whether the act committed was in response to a use or threat of force that the person knew was lawful. So, for example, let's say I go to the bar and I'm at the bar, I've had too many drinks. And so they send the bouncer to say, you got to go home. Too many drinks. Now, I've had too many drinks, so I say, not going. And the bouncer says, it's time to go, puts his hands on my shoulders, and is going to start walking me out. And now I go, oh, this bouncer is using force against me, because he is. Is it legal for me to pull a knife and stab him? Almost certainly not, because the bouncer's use of force is lawful under the circumstances. So those are sort of the factors with examples to sort of tell us what we're looking at. So far he's not doing too badly. He's correctly described the law. I think he just picked a really bad example here. And you know what? We all have bad days. We all sometimes pick a bad example. I've probably done it, like, even in this video. So I'm not going to fault him too much for that. The problem is that he then moves on to just getting some things outright wrong. So let's have a look at that. We're going to see, he's going to be asked to basically classify certain items in terms of their legality. And he's going to get some things wrong in a really bad way. Okay, let's go through.
Welcome back. With thousands of assaults each year, many are choosing to equip themselves for personal safety. But understanding what's legally permissible for self-defense in Canada isn't so cut and dry. So what exactly can you carry? We have a
all right, so right now we're already at a bit of a trick question because Canadian law says that it's illegal to carry a weapon or to possess a weapon for purposes dangerous to the public peace. And unfortunately, the case law has said that that includes self-defense against kind of the ordinary dangers of the world. Now, there may be situations where it might be legal to carry a weapon for self-defense, but they're narrow situations and you probably don't fall into them. But what does this mean? Well, it means that it's a trick question because it's illegal to carry anything for self-defense, because if you're carrying it for that purpose, then it's becoming a weapon. So if you're carrying around just a rock, because maybe if somebody attacks you, you could hit them with the rock, then it's illegal to carry the rock for that purpose. It's also illegal to carry weapons concealed in Canada. Now, the problem is that they're also going to ask questions about whether these things are legal to just own, whether they're prohibited weapons that you can't have, and there's going to be some mistakes here. Let's keep going.
Collection of items here right in front of me. We'll go through them one by one. Why don't we actually start with a baton? Because I'll tell you, I know more people than not who not necessarily carry a baton, but use something for self-defense, whether it's a spray or a taser. Oh, there you go. I don't think this is legal.
No.
Okay, so depending on what he means there, because that was ambiguous. If he means that it's not legal to carry that for purposes of self-defense, then his answer is solid. But if he means that it's not legal to own this because he thinks that that's a banned item, then he's wrong. And we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt here and say, okay, he's saying that you can't carry it for self-defense. So we're giving him the benefit of the doubt. That's going to evaporate because he's going to get some things wrong shortly.
No. Okay. Is there anything in front of me? Like, how about a taser?
No.
Not legal?
Keep
Look,
going.
Scary.
Two problems here. First of all, that's not a taser. That is a stun gun. They are differently defined in the law. They're both banned, but it's not a taser. A taser shoots darts that incapacitate through pulsed electricity. This thing is two prongs and it generates that sort of... So, yes, this is actually a prohibited weapon. He's correct there. He's correct to make the facial expression that he's making, that, like, what are you doing with that on video? You know, why are you telling everyone that you have this? But it's not a taser. So, but he is correct. It is prohibited. Let's keep going.
Scary sounding, though. I mean,
It does make a scary sound, yeah, but
alarm.
legal.
How about
Now, this particular alarm is not legal because it's attached to the stun gun, but an alarm is legal and in fact wouldn't even be considered a weapon. But now let's see what happens next.
spray?
Totally illegal.
Totally illegal?
Totally.
This is bear spray. Or
He is totally wrong about that. Let's see.
actually, this is coyote spray. Dog spray.
No.
None of that's legal?
Doesn't matter what label they put on it. It's pepper spray. It's a prohibited weapon.
But what if...
And the problem is he is wrong on this one. It's not hard to determine that he's wrong. We can go to the regulations. So I guess let's pull those up. So the regulation that bans this says, and this is just on a list of banned items, any device designed to be used for the purpose of injuring, immobilizing, or otherwise incapacitating any person by the discharge therefrom of tear gas, mace, or other gas, or any liquid, spray, powder, or other substance that is capable of injuring, immobilizing, or otherwise incapacitating any person. Now, you'll note there are some key limitations here. Even though it's fairly broad, it's any device designed, so the design of the item matters. It doesn't say intent anywhere in this. Designed to be used for the purpose of injuring, immobilizing, or otherwise incapacitating any person. No matter how much you love your dog, it's not a person. It doesn't get to vote. And, you know, Canada has bears. Canada's in fact got the full menu of bears. We got black bears, we got grizzly bears, we got polar bears. And you're allowed to own sprays to deal with those because the law says you can't have sprays that are designed for use against persons, but bears aren't persons. Coyotes aren't persons. So when he says it doesn't matter what's on the label and it doesn't matter what it was designed for, persons versus coyotes, he's just dead wrong. That's just not correct. The government puts out messages actually telling people, like, if you're going into bear country, that it might be a good idea to have bear spray. Now, the wrinkle on all of this is that depending on context and so forth, you might be at risk of being charged or potentially convicted for carrying a concealed weapon or possession of a weapon for purposes dangerous to the public peace. Because even though it's not banned to own bear spray, it is illegal to carry it around for the purpose of defending yourself against people. Now, how do the police prove that that coyote spray or that dog spray that you've got is intended for use against people? Well, either there's some sort of context that says that, or most commonly, people get convicted on that because they were opening their mouth and they told the police something that was dumb that they shouldn't have said, and that gets them in trouble. Okay, let's carry on here. They got some things to say.
If you walk in parks at night and you carry it for that purpose, maybe it's about the intent?
The intent. Now, I always say the intent, and again, and it's what I teach in my self-defense classes. What we sell at my store is dog spray or bear spray. But how?
Now, you'll note this is a former police officer. She's telling us what she sells in her store. Lots of people on this panel sort of have a grift going on, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But Yeah, she's like, yeah, I sell this stuff. If it was illegal, she'd be admitting to a fairly serious crime, like, hey, I'm engaged in weapons trafficking. She's right. The lawyer in this one is wrong.
However, if you're using dog spray and you live downtown Toronto, chances are if the police stop you and ask you why you have bear spray, you better have a good excuse why you're using bear spray. However, you have dog spray, and I've seen mailmen carry it, and I've seen, other people just carry it, but it's for dogs. So it's the intent and the way, it's all about articulation.
So, I think it's more about police discretion,
It's not at all about police discretion because it's not illegal to have dog spray. He's sort of saying, oh, well, the police are just cutting you a break even though you've got this illegal stuff. And it's like, no, it's actually legal to have, dog spray isn't a prohibited weapon. So
that
the
too.
police make the decision whether they're going to. Technically, this is illegal. You could be arrested after the show. Are they going to come here and arrest you? No, because they're going to.
They could come here and arrest her, but not for the spray. It would be for the stun gun. The stun gun's the problem, not the pepper spray, not the baton. She's actually perfectly fine opening those and certainly using them in the context of using them as props on a TV show.
They use their discretion. Officers know, if someone's walking around in a park at night with that, they're not going to hassle you.
You don't think? Because this could be perceived as a weapon. Let's say I'm on the TTC and I've got this in my pocket.
Right. Different world, yeah. Then you could be in trouble.
Not only that.
And the thing is they're like, you need to have a good excuse for having this. You don't need to have a good excuse. The government actually needs to prove that you were committing an offense by having it for purposes dangerous to the public peace. You don't have to provide an excuse. Most people get themselves in trouble by trying to provide an excuse because typically what they say is something like, oh, well, it's a really bad neighborhood. And now they've told the police enough that the police can arrest them. Yeah, this is not fantastic. If the police are asking you why you have something in your pocket, I recommend that you call a lawyer. They will most likely tell you not to say anything, but call the lawyer because at that point you are at risk and you should take steps.
Aren't you more likely to get yourself?
So she is a certified peer support specialist, and everything she says on this whole episode is awful. Everything she says is just the worst. Let's go back and we'll see the full thing she has to say here.
You could be in trouble.
Not only that, aren't you more likely to get yourself into an altercation when you're carrying a weapon?
I don't know.
I believe that was something I read once upon a time. And
oh, you believe that's something you read, huh? Now, here's the thing. There are some people who carry weapons because they believe that they're going to get into altercations and because they're looking to get into altercations. We typically call those criminals. But she's saying, like, oh, if you're carrying the weapon, you're more likely to get in trouble. That's not how this works. Like, if you have a woman who's got to walk home late at night in a bad neighborhood and you give her pepper spray, assuming that we're legal, it's not like she's like, oh, well, now I got to go find the creepy guy. No, she's still trying to avoid the creepy guy. It's just now maybe if he finds her, she's got something she can do about it. There's supposed to be a panel of experts, but like I read something once upon a time, I believe, is not exactly a great statement of expertise.
And so when you're showing up carrying these weapons,
Right.
you're already sort of
Arming
you've got
yourself,
yes,
yeah.
you're
Feel like
showing
you're
up armed,
anticipating
you're
it almost.
anticipating
Right.
attack, and
So
you're
if I could just
And they're all nodding along here, and it's like, no, this is not actually. And here's the problem. Let's say you do use a weapon or you engage in some sort of act of self-defense. As noted by the lawyer here, you'll have to, assume you're going to get charged because just about everybody does. So you get charged with that. And then you are brought in and they're going to determine, the government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that your self-defense was not reasonable, that it was not lawful. But the people deciding that may be like this, right? And you see them all nodding along with, oh, it's, so like, this is the problem, is that maybe that lawyer becomes a judge one day and gets these things wrong and thinks it is unreasonable for, one of the elderly women who we'll see in the audience to grab a golf club when four people break into their house. If he thinks that's unreasonable and he becomes a judge, then that might be the person who's deciding your self-defense case. And that, to me, is the problem here. Now, we're going to see, this is the person who's about to speak up is someone who I think maybe they might not have expected her views, because she's an advocate for abused women and children. And she comes out pretty strongly in favor of self-defense and weapons for that purpose. So here she goes.
Interject your statement. Texas is one of the safest states in the U.S. And the reason for that is you have the right to carry.
Now, I'm just going to say, look at the two women over her shoulder, right? This is the audience they're looking at here. Are we saying that one of these women, if you give her the right to carry pepper spray to go walk in the park, that she's suddenly going to go looking for trouble? Yeah, that woman in red, she looks like she's, she looks like she's spoiling for a fight. Come on.
Sure, in the States, they have a little bit more relaxed gun laws than they do in Canada. And our gun violence in Canada is much lower than it is in the United States. Isn't that true?
Our violence in general is lower in Canada than it is in the States. Yeah, they're going to let her finish eventually.
I understand that, but my point is simply that when we're talking about the right to survival, which is your only instinct as your human instinct is to survive, if you're out in the streets and you are carrying, I'm not saying that we should be doing that, but I'm just saying it's fascinating that in that state it is working, and it is working for that reason, that everybody understands what their rights are and not to cross the line.
But can I...
She, during the course of this show, makes several of those kinds of statements, like very pro self-defense. In another place, she says that somebody who followed somebody out of their store and attacked them with a bat. I actually covered this with another thing. After the person tried to rob him with that same bat, she's like, that person shouldn't have been charged. They shouldn't be facing sentencing. And she got a round of applause. So this audience is much more in tune with what she has to say than with anyone else on the panel, by far.
Interject and just say as well, everyone who, well, you hope, and probably in Texas we're dealing with a lot of legal firearm owners.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just note, the person who was just speaking there and who's going to sort of respond here, runs a Citizens Self-Defense Academy. So she teaches self-defense with martial arts, no weapons. Consider that when we see her next position.
People who have training to use those firearms, and they have training to understand the law of what happens if they use them.
Right.
But, I used to carry things like that in my purse until I made regular high-pressure martial arts training a part of my life. I don't feel I need to carry those. Hope, and probably in Texas we're dealing with a lot of legal firearm owners.
Yes.
People who have training to use those firearms, and they have training to understand the law of what happens if they use them.
Right.
But, I used to carry things like that in my purse until I made regular high-pressure martial arts training a part of my life. I don't feel
the high-pressure martial arts training is like one of the slogans of her company. Now, I just want to note, we're going to just look over her shoulder to the woman behind her. And I don't mean to pick on her. She looks like a sweet old woman. She looks very nice. How much martial arts training do you think it's going to take to get the woman who's over her shoulder there and get her into a position where she's able to win a fight with, say, a 20-year-old meth addict? Just how many classes do we expect? How many hours does it take to get her into fighting shape to fend off that guy. I'm thinking that it's just not going to happen. So she's saying, oh, well, what if everyone learns martial arts? Wouldn't that be great? And I'm going, you're in the wrong room. Martial arts training is great as an idea, and it's great as a backup, but it just doesn't provide any protection for like the woman in the background there or somebody in a wheelchair or whatever else. I mean, she says that she offers her course to people with all sorts of ranges of ability, but her webpage does note that you do have to be able to navigate a flight of stairs up and down. So not so much if you're in a wheelchair. What martial art works if you're in a wheelchair? Maybe there is one, but quite frankly, and people who are predators tend to target the vulnerable. The people that you see in the background of this, this room are more likely to be targeted by robbers and so forth because they are perhaps less likely to put up a strong physical defense. The other thing is that there is a size difference between men and women, and there is a strength difference. There's a reason why we don't have, mixed gender MMA. At least I don't think we do. And, as much as she is skilled and trained, she'll probably still lose a fight against the 6'2" guy who just got out of prison, where he spent all of his time doing weightlifting and engaging in fights with other inmates. And I think she'd probably still lose against a guy with a knife. And definitely against a guy with a gun. So, yeah, let's keep going here.
I feel I need to carry those things anymore because I have the skills. And
not only that, before you had the skills, if you went to use it and you weren't trained,
yeah,
you would be more likely
myself in the face if
right.
it wasn't.
Right. Or you'd be more likely to have your weapon taken from you.
The point.
The weapon taken from you thing is just a thing. I've been doing criminal defense for a long time. I've never seen the weapon taken from you thing, except with the robber who attacked with the bat at that one place. The weapon taken from you just doesn't seem to happen that often. And part of the reason for that is that the attackers, they're not like, oh, I really hope my victim has a weapon that I can get. They've brought their own, right? It's, if you're getting robbed, it's kind of a bring your own weapon party, and the robbers never fail. They bring their weapon. So the whole thing about like, oh, they're going to take it away from, no, they're not. It's just not really a big thing. She sort of gets this sort of smug look off and while being completely talking out of her butt. I guess she's an expert in therapy and so forth, but when she's talking about self-defense, just completely wrong. Always.
That you're making, which is when everybody knows that everyone can fight, there's less likely to be a fight. I don't think we necessarily need weapons for that.
Again, how do we know that grandma in the back there can fight? Like, what training is there? She might be able to defend herself quite adeptly with a weapon. She's not going to be able to, there's no amount of I know kung fu that's going to solve that.
As a society, we knew that we were, just like we understand most people have a driver's license, if we knew everyone in this room knows
to that.
You got to learn true self-defense, in my opinion, and Michelle can speak to this, but who has the training? Most people don't.
So let me interject for a second.
So the solution is apparently to take her course, right? And to get the training from that. And I'm just like, that's it might be a great solution for some people. It's just not a practical solution for a lot of people. And quite frankly, like, the people who are getting targeted are going to be typically the vulnerable. People who are predators act like predators. When we describe somebody as a predator in society, they act very similarly to predators in nature. And if you think about something like, a mountain lion. A mountain lion can't afford to get into a fight every time every time it wants to eat, because pretty quickly that'll be a dead mountain lion. So what do? They don't target animals that can fight back. They target the ones that they think can't. So even if you offered like everybody gets martial arts training, well, that doesn't help grandma. It doesn't help the person in the wheelchair. It doesn't help any of those things. And yeah, it's gonna get a little worse. We're gonna look at something that I think is even more sort of like offensively what the hell. And so let's jump to that. It's going to be that person in the green jacket who I said is awful every time. She's going to continue being awful. The woman who's up on screen has just noted that she was attacked at one point and somebody snatched her expensive sunglasses off of her face, which obviously would have been a fairly unpleasant experience. And let's see the response to that.
You go ahead.
If you're talking about vulnerability, if you're going out, you're feeling vulnerable, you're wearing, enough clothing on you to house someone for a year, the person who's interested in what you've got on you, they're the vulnerable population. They're actually experiencing vulnerability themselves to be in a situation. People do well when they...
Oh, the person who robbed you is the real victim. The person who violently attacked you and assaulted you as they were stealing from you, thereby committing robbery, they're the real victim in this. Are you kidding me? And again, if you are engaging in self-defense, she might be your juror. She might be on the panel. The real victim is actually the person who attacked you. Okay. I shake my head like there's just nothing else to do there. All right, let's jump ahead. I'm skipping over lots of this, but we're just gonna jump ahead to to some other some of the questions here. Okay, let's have a look.
Possible. Thank you, Cynthia. Michael, go ahead.
I see the value of self-defense courses, but I think they are inadequate.
By the way, we're jumping to this guy because I think this guy is like probably the smartest person in this room. Just he's just gonna drop some truth, and later we're gonna cut back to him just for you'll see why I like this guy. Okay, let's keep going.
In a lot of situations, and I think it could put people in danger. Knife attacks are really up in this city. And most self-defense experts will tell you that it doesn't matter how strong you are, how skilled you are against a person with a knife. If you're up against a person with a knife, the best thing you can do is run. But if you can't run, you're in trouble. With regard to hunters and prey that was raised earlier, I think the hunters would be a little more reluctant to take on the prey if they thought the prey had a weapon of some sort. And it seems to me that the laws that we currently have are antediluvian. They're based on the life that was here maybe in the 60s in Canada. In the United States, they have stand your ground laws. They have more liberal laws in terms of defending yourself. I'd like to know whether any of the panelists are aware of an attempt, a serious attempt to improve the laws so that ordinary citizens, regardless of their abilities, can defend themselves.
Well, we're not.
I mean, he's just absolutely right on that one when he's, talking. And the funny thing is he's going to, like he says, it's a bad idea to try to defend yourself unarmed against a knife. And you're going to see somebody wants to argue with that point. But first, we're going to hear from the lawyer who actually, I agree with most of what he has to say here. So.
Not in Kansas anymore, that's for sure.
That's right.
In terms of the laws, we have what we have. They're pretty broad. I can't see them changing anytime soon other than weaponizing people, right? So the law as it is now, it does allow you to stand your ground. You don't have to retreat. The law in Canada does not require you to back down or retreat. You can defend yourself. You just have.
This is correct to a point. There are circumstances where you may have an obligation to retreat, but all of this gets really complicated. Usually that's not true, especially in your home. The courts have been pretty clear that there isn't typically a duty to retreat from your house. So yeah, let's keep going here.
Have to be reasonable in what you're doing.
But the hunters can carry bats, they can
Right.
carry knives. We can't carry even pepper spray. You know, I'm not talking about going around spraying people,
Right.
you know, liberally. I'm talking about defending oneself. To defend yourself, you can't do that. And the laws seem to be out of step with the current situation that we are now facing in our city. You know, there are a lot of people here in this room, they can take a self-defense course, but they're not going to have the strength
Right.
to withstand somebody who's really,
Of course
you know,
not.
coming at you.
So would you?
You know, people in the room are clapping because they've been listening to these people saying, take a self-defense course, and they know that this is unreasonable, that this is not an answer for their situation. You know, oh, I'm 80 and I've got a walker, but I'm gonna like learn to throw a punch. What's that gonna do? Yeah.
Agree that the laws are out of step?
I think they're out of step, but how far do we want to go in weaponizing individuals, right? Do we then allow people with mental health issues to carry weapons? Do we allow, it's a slippery slope. We have to be careful in whatever laws we do change, because the more we put weapons out there, weapons can be used against you as well, right? Not
But they already are. That's the problem, is the criminals already are armed, and there isn't any law that you can put in there that's going to stop them from being armed. The question is whether Michael from the audience can be armed, or the, you know, the nice looking older woman who's in the background. Like, can they defend themselves? The only way that somebody in their position can defend themselves against the 4 teenagers who've come into their house, if those teenagers intend to hurt them, is with a weapon. You know, not Michael there. He looks like he's in pretty good shape, but I don't think he's going to take on 4 teenagers with or without a golf club. Maybe I'd give him pretty good odds with a shotgun, though. I'm betting Michael knows how to use a shotgun. And Michael, if you see this, reach out. I would love to talk to you and just to say good work.
just against attackers. So it's a complicated issue for sure.
I think there are other lines of defense that we're not talking about right now, such as if you're on the subway and you're feeling insecure, you're somewhere and you're feeling strange, not just having your cell phone at the ready, but making the call, saying, yes, I'm just on this train car, I'm landing at this point, this is the person I'm looking at, I'm feeling a little bit strange, already you.
Oh my God, shut up. She is the worst. So 2 things. 1, if you're already being attacked with a knife, and they're gonna get to this right away, like if somebody is sitting there like with a knife in your face, somebody's there, they've got a knife in your face, they're threatening you. You're gonna pull out your cell phone, you're going to be like, there is a guy here and I think he's about to stab me. You're going to be stabbed to death before anybody gets there. The other thing is, if the guy isn't and he's just making you uncomfortable, you're going to pull out your phone, you're going to dial 911, and they're going to be like, 911, what's your emergency? And you're going to be like, police. Meanwhile, the guy's sitting there hearing you making this call, and the police are going to be there, and she's going to say, let's take it back to what she said here. She's like, let's just see what she said.
I think there are other lines of defense that we're not talking about right now, such as if you're on the subway and you're feeling insecure, you're somewhere and you're feeling strange, not just having your cell phone at the ready, but making the call, saying, yes, I'm just on this train car, I'm landing at this point, this is the person I'm looking at, I'm feeling a little bit strange,
911, I'm feeling a little bit strange. I'm feeling a little bit insecure. And they'll be like, yeah, that is not an emergency. Like, the police response time, if the guy is actually stabbing you, is probably around 10 minutes. And that's if the guy is currently sticking a knife into and out of your vital organs. 10 minutes. The police response time for I'm feeling a little bit strange is just never. they're not coming for I'm feeling a little bit strange. So, again, this person could be a juror. Why didn't you call the police to say you were feeling a little bit strange? Uh, yeah. You can see why I'm not a big fan of her opinions on self-defense. She might be an excellent counselor, therapist, etc. But when she's talking about self-defense, she's just like a compass that points to wrong with emphasis.
Already you've taken a different sort of approach to your defense. You're calling in reinforcements, which I think could be
I'm feeling a little bit. You're not calling in reinforcements. With I'm feeling a little bit strange.
very powerful. We're not really talking about that too much with
This, I mean, this. It seems clear that she's never actually been in the circumstance of having to do this, because otherwise, how could she say this? It's so bizarre.
respect to showing
But
up. And
again, with Michael's example, you've got some guy coming at you with a
Exactly.
knife.
You're not gonna pull
You're
out
not
your
going to pull
phone.
out your phone. You're not going to.
not practical.
That's like a life or death type of
But if
situation.
I-
So it's hard.
It's
If I
life or
may,
death.
though,
And he's like, I 100% agree with the lawyer with him giving the expression of like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and and he's right to do so.
There's no self-defense course in the space of a 4-week, a 6-week, whatever it is, that will give you what you need to have a fighting chance against a knife. And you can
Right.
be a military or police and be killed by a knife. That being
So she's saying exactly the right thing, and then she moves on to
said, there are certain principles, and I cannot emphasize this enough. When we teach self-defense, it's an introduction, but it is a lifestyle choice you make. We have a guy who works with us who was attacked by a knife on the subway. He got cut. You're almost always going to get cut when you go up against a knife, but he understood the principles of wrist control that we
Michael's expression here is giving me life, because this is exactly my feeling. He's looking at her like, you just said self-defense is not suitable for a knife, and now you're telling us the story about how he defended himself with from a knife, and how he got cut. You're gonna get cut. Who wants to get cut? If you get cut, you may never be the same. Like if they cut up your wrist, you may never be able to use that hand right. If you get slashed, if you get stabbed, you may be dealing with all sorts of things. I have had the tremendous honor to be able to speak to a large number of people who are, unlike myself, tremendous badasses. I am not a badass, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I've talked to people who have been trained, by militaries, by police, and by just, practice to be incredibly effective at, hand-to-hand combat to the degree that anybody can. And without doubt or without question, they have always told me, here is the strategy that you can use for, for self-defense against a knife. And the best advice you can get about knife defense is, if you're walking along and somebody pulls a knife on you, run away. Run away. And if you can't run away, there is a technique that is fairly reliable. It is used by police forces and so forth in order to prevent somebody with a knife from taking you out. It's a tried and true technique. It's been used over and over and over again, and it is a gun. Those are basically the list of things. And so when we've got Michael in the background here with the very appropriate, what the fuck are you smoking expression? Absolutely. Michael is correct.
use in certain martial arts, and he walked away with his life because he maintained control of the wrist. For myself, knowing how many people carry a knife in the wintertime, like I have my gloves in my pocket, but I have a pair of gloves that are tactical gloves that probably Nichelle would sell that are fairly blade resistant.
Okay, did you catch how dumb this is? This is really bad. I've got my gloves in my pocket and they're fairly blade resistant. Fan freaking tastic. What do you think that's gonna do for you? Somebody comes up and is threatening you with a knife and you're like, hold on, let me get my gloves out of my pocket and put on my blade resistant gloves so that I can tangle with you and get cut up. Are these people from planet Earth? Um, you know, do you really think you're going to be sitting there pulling your gloves on in the face of an armed attacker? Unreal.
Or little things you can do to buy yourself opportunities.
Yes. Yes, Michael's expression of like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? We're almost at the end here. We're just gonna roll to that. But Michael's expression of like, what the hell is exactly appropriate. That is exactly what he should be thinking.
But I don't believe that it's hopeless. I've seen a lot of people walk away from scary stuff because they have training.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there.
Michael, if you see this, reach out. If you're somebody who knows Michael, let him know that I think he's awesome. Because of all the people in that room, he has the most sense. The woman there, I believe her name is Hanya Kazemchuk. She also had some sense. The lawyer doesn't do too badly. I criticize him. He doesn't do too badly. But yeah, some of the people in that room were just awful. It is what it is. And as I said, they get the law wrong in this. Their example's not very good. There's various issues with all of this. But one of the things that, I've said before, I'm going to re-emphasize, they could be your judge one day. They could be your jury. If you're in a situation and, you've got one of these people. So to the greatest extent possible, the sort of best advice on self-defense in Canada for legal thing, like just for making sure it's legal, is if you got any other options, try not to use them, because you might be correct in law. You just might be judged by people who aren't necessarily the best. I think that the lawyer there, I think he will probably make a good judge. I disagree with some of his, it seems like he's pretty anti-weapon. I disagree with him there, but he'd probably be just fine as a judge. Some of those people as jurors, I'd be, so yeah, you don't know what's going to happen. Typically, the best place to be in a situation of self-defense is the person who took every step they possibly could to try to avoid things. And I say typically because even that's not necessarily a protection. I can't go through like bright line rules of what will make you okay and what won't. But I can just say it's not a great place to be to have to use force in self-defense, even though the case law is actually fairly favorable to the person who is using force in self-defense. Most of the time, people are not able to, especially if they're older, as many of the people in the audience, the target audience of the show, are. And yeah, it's unfortunate because in general, I like the idea that if somebody wants to go and stab grandma back there, that it goes badly for them. I'm okay with bad things happening to anybody who wants to stab grandma. And I'm not scared of grandma. You could give grandma a shotgun and I'd probably be sitting at the next range bay over from grandma going, nice shot. Grandma doesn't scare me. Michael doesn't scare me. That audience doesn't scare me. But there are people out there in the world who scare me, and they're already armed. So Anyway, lots of you guys wanted me to comment on this one. Again, the show is The Zoomer. That was from May 24th. I'm going to link the full show below so that you can check out everything they've got. They've got some further stuff about like self-defense tips for like techniques to get out of grabs. I'll let you judge those yourself. But yeah, so some people wanted me to comment on it. Those are my comments. Not super impressed. And I guess with these comments, I'm probably not going to get invited to their next panel on self-defense. Even though maybe I should be. But yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I would love to say I've got something to sell, like in terms of like go buy some secret technique for self-defense. I don't have anything to sell. I do have a Patreon where I offer basically nothing other than the opportunity to support me if you like what you're hearing. So that link is in the description below as well. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. I also want to thank all of my Patreon supporters, but at the $50 level, Purple Dragonair, Cielo, CCFR, PJs Forever, Canada's National Firearms Association, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and Bottle Shock in Oz. I also want to thank at the $10 level, Mark, Lindsay Metcalf, Larry Kalniak, Kyle Fox, Drunk All of the Baileys, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, and Dorky Dane. I think I also missed at the $20 level, Aaron. So thank you as well to all of my supporters, all of my viewers. I hope that this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.